Okay, this is the first installment of our read-through and discussion of The Riddle of Steel, this book. This is the revised second printing of the game. It was originally released in 2001, and this was released in 2002 to both positive and negative reviews. It had very strong marketing. I think it polarized some opinions. I think it was different enough that a lot of people didn't really understand how to play it. I think with hindsight, a game like this might be easier to adapt to explore and understand. But anyway, we're going to take a look at this and go through chapter by chapter for the RPG Learning Group, a small group of people who like to read games that are new to them and talk about them. So, The Riddle of Steel. Role-playing with an edge. Just going from the back, this was billed as, if you were in the store and you walked in and you picked it up, the most realistic combat system in any RPG, requiring thought, strategy, and cunning, not just brute strength or a hack-and-slash mentality. I'm already feeling some pushback against the games of the time. Limitless use of sorcery and magic. Sorcerers create their own spells on the fly with easy-to-use guidelines. So freeform magic system, which in those days was a little uncommon. My experience with freeform magic in those days would have been Ars Magica and Mage. So first priority on who a character is, not what a character is. I said things like that myself when talking about games with classes versus games without classes. So a lot of this seems very familiar to me, and it's, like I said, it's polarizing language. So anyway, The Riddle of Steel. Let's take a look at the beginning of the book. When we go to the contents, everything's divided up into books. Each book is on a basic topic about the game, and then they're divided up into subsections. So book 1 is called In the Beginning. Starts on page 3. Begins with what is a role-playing game. It's kind of funny that we still have what is a role-playing game in these games, but the important follow-up section to that is what kind of a role-playing game is the Riddle of Steel, and I think that's very important to include, and we'll take a look at that. This is followed by the basic rules and mechanics. And then we get into the 3 subsections of this book. Dice, the major roles and tests, and attributes. Okay. The game actually does start, and each book starts with fiction. I'm not the world's biggest fan of how fiction tends to get used in role-playing games now. But, this isn't bad. What is a role-playing game? It's a pretty typical explanation of what is a role-playing game. What kind of RPG is the Riddle of Steel? This I like. The Riddle of Steel involves elements of fantasy familiar to most gamers. It lists magic, swordplay, intrigue, war, and adventure. What makes the game special? Right up front, they're saying this game is different from those games. Maybe all games do this, but not all games explain it. What makes the game special and unusual is its approach to these traditional elements. Okay. Role-playing games have always seemed to seek some form of balance in play, found in characters with levels, classes, and limited choices in sorcery and combat. Things are different here. Magic is deadly and powerful. Even the weakest sorcerer is a lethal threat. Swordplay is fast, dynamic, and ends in blood. Choose your battles wisely. Then it says, everything that we've just said, you'll have to play the game to make sure. I very much like that. It's not a game you just read and say, It's a game to be played, experienced, to feel the difference. Second half of this is players take on the roles of people. Again, specifying the difference between what a character does and who they are. So these people, so their players hope, may one day become heroes, legends, kings, discover the answer to the Riddle of Steel. It's kind of cool. All right, this is a game about personal conflict, moral dilemma, the brevity of life, and the search for answers. Basic rules in game mechanics immediately follows. So we have, what is a role-playing game? We have a piece of fiction that gives us a sense of the world, which is presented at the end of the book. We have, what is a role-playing game if you've never seen or heard of one before and someone has given you this book? Then what kind of RPG is this one? Then what stuff that's going to happen at the table do you actually have to do? So rather than burying the system later in the book, it's right up front. This is what you need. This is what you need to do. So we start with dice. You will need dice to play this game. You'll need 1d6. You'll need 10d10. We recommend you have a bowl to keep the inactive or non-successful dice in to clarify what you've rolled and what you haven't. And one of the dice of the d10s be red, and one of them be white. This is what you need, and that is what the dice section is all about. Section 2 is what are you going to do with those dice? The major roles and tests, and they list out the 5 different types of roles. These are attribute tests, skill tests, proficiency tests, contested roles, and extended roles. This section goes on to also talk about hit location rolls and fumbling, when you do worse than fail. Let's talk about fumbling first. So it's possible to fumble. If you roll no successes and your remaining dice include 2 ones, you've fumbled. Attribute tests, the first type of roll, is the basic sort of roll. How do I accomplish the thing? We have target numbers and we have degrees of success. So you're rolling a number of d10s. The seneschal is assigning a target number, and the number of dice that equal or exceed that target number are kept as successes. The target numbers range from 2 to 22. Remember, you're rolling d10s and you're looking for that number or higher on the die. So obviously you can't roll anything higher than 10 on a d10. If you do roll a 10, a process called stacking, this is an open-ended or exploding roll, takes place where you roll that die again and add it on. So if you roll another 10, you add it on. So that's 22 is billed as being, or described as being, unbelievable target number. They go from 2, foolproof, through 4, easy, 6, average, 8, challenging, 10, difficult, 12, very difficult, 14, amazing, 16, heroic, 20, nearly impossible, 22, unbelievable. Then degrees of success. No success is failure. As I mentioned earlier, no success with 2 ones, fumble. If you're in a situation like a contested roll where there could be a tie, not just you trying to beat a target number, the result varies. It may be something that is spelled out because it's a combat maneuver versus a combat maneuver, or it's left open for interpretation. 1 is described as being a narrow success. 5 is described as flawless. Goes through 2, comfortable, 3, room to spare, 4, expertly done. These are pretty broad and vague descriptions that definitely build on one another, but if I were to ask you, describe a comfortable success, we may not agree. So there's a certain amount of openness for all that this game gets billed as being, or expected to be purely simulationist. Oh, they're going for realistic combat. It must be very chart heavy, very detail heavy. There's a very strong theme of description, interpretation, the application of your experience to what you're seeing. So we'll talk about later when we get to some of the afterwards or included essays. the game may not be what you think it is. Okay. How do the different types of rolls work? An attribute test, you take a number of dice equal to your attribute plus or minus dice that are removed as modifiers, bonuses or penalties. The seneschal gives you a difficulty, you roll, see if you succeed. A skill test works the same way, except the target number is determined by your skill. And unlike most games where a higher number is good, this is your target number. So your skill is actually getting lower, right? So the better you are, the lower your skill rating is. And so the lower your target number is, the more successes you're going to get. A proficiency test is the use of a specific type of die pool. And they're listed as the combat pool, the missile pool, and the sorcery pool. The player will choose how many dice from their pool they're going to apply to a specific roll. Contested rolls are I roll against an opponent. It can be any of the previously mentioned rolls. Same as the extended roll. Any of the previously mentioned rolls, but this time it's being done for a long-term thing, or it's used to be making something, studying something. You make an extended roll. A certain number of successes are required, maybe within a certain period of time, or each roll represents a period of time. These are standard. Anybody who's played a few different games has likely encountered these types of rolls before. The hit location roll is what the D6 is for, and you roll it to see. Okay, and that ends that section. Then we get to the attributes. These are described, so right away we get a sense of what the attribute tests are all about. And they're divided up into 3 different types: temporal, mental, and spiritual. We're going to be talking about the spiritual attributes a lot. They were the big thing introduced by this game, and we can still feel their effect today. The temporal attributes, these are obvious when you hear about them: strength, agility, toughness, endurance, and health. There is a listed average. 4 is the human average, and there's a maximum, 10. Same applies to the mental attributes. These are a little bit less obvious when we hear them, but once we read the description, it's easy enough to remember, and similar to some pre-existing games. The average is the same, 4, and a maximum of 10 for humans. Willpower, wit, mental aptitude, social, and perception are these attributes. Willpower is fairly obvious. Wit is thinking speed. Mental aptitude is the ability to learn, retain. Your memory is here. Social is talking about your ability to interact with others, your cultural awareness, charisma, empathy. Perception is perception. But then we get to the spiritual attributes, and these are categorized but not defined. The player will define them in terms of their character, which again brings out that emphasis on who is this character, not what job and skills do they have per se. Spiritual attributes are categorized in the following ways. There's conscience, destiny, drive, faith, luck, and passion. There are also derived attributes: reflex, aim, knockdown, knockout, and move. Sorcery has a different set of derived attributes, and we'll keep that with sorcery when we get there. All right, conscience. This is the character's desire to do the right thing, their awareness of right and wrong, their awareness of compassion or what it takes to be a hero, that sort of thing. Destiny is your higher calling. I want to be king, or he will be king, that sort of thing. Drive is the representation of a specific and unusual level of determination or ambition. Right? Something that the character might die for. They want to accomplish something. Faith is the bond, the religious bond, the belief in something. Luck. Passion is a specific love or hate or loyalty or connection with something. So Arthur is used as a representation here. Lancelot has his loyalty to Arthur and his love of Guinevere. You can represent this through passion. That whole triangle. Arthur's companionship with Lancelot, his love of Guinevere. Guinevere's, being torn between her love of both men. Interesting stuff. The revenge of the County Monte Cristo. The revenge seeking of the Count of Monte Cristo is also listed here. His passion, his desire for revenge, not listed as a drive. Okay. That's it. That's the end of book 1. Once you finish these very few pages, this takes you from page 3 to page 11, you have a sense of what this game is going to ask you to do mechanically and the basics of how your character is defined. You understand that, and you move into character creation next. So far, the book is pretty clear. It's telling you it doesn't want to be a typical fantasy game. It's telling you it wants to focus on the character. It's showing you tools that it purports will give you realistic combat and struggle, but those tools are being described in a narrative way. You're going to interpret them. You're going to define them for yourself. Very unusual animal for this period in time. So this ends our introductory look at book 1 in the beginning of the Riddle of Steel. If anyone else has it, if anyone else has read it and wants to talk about it and move toward an eventual playthrough, please participate. You can find us by searching on Google Plus for the RPG Learning Group or on Facebook for the same title. I look forward to sharing this all with you. See you next time.